Martin Luther King once said, "We are not makers of history, but we are made by history." My fellow colleagues, I greet you all and I welcome you to my GES 713 presentation with the given topic by Prof. Mulambo. What is the historian's task? My introduction, it is as follows. History is the study of the past. Therefore, historians are interested in all aspects of the past, particularly in human affairs, as their main objective is to research, study, analyze, interpret, and document facts of the past human history, either from a political, artistic, or economical point of view. In my presentation, I'll be focused on the task done by historians. Our learning outcomes. By the end of the presentation, you should know the intellectual task that defines a historian, how historians recover the past, the questions that historians are required to answer when researching, and lastly, how history is divided into various categories. In looking at how historians recover the past, they discover and make sense of archival information that exists about a given event or time in the past. They interpret and analyze individuals' piece of evidence in their process of historical inquiry by looking at the following historical concepts. Number 1, perspective. 2, change and continuity. 3, causes and effects. 4, evidence. 5, empathy. 6, significance. And lastly, contestability. The role of historians, it is to conceptualize, describe, contextualize, explain, interpret events and the circumstance of the past. Historians sketch out ways of presenting the complex activities and events of the past. They follow a method of investigation that relies heavily on facts and historical records by past historians. They explain and interpret important outcomes and base their findings on evidence in the present from the facts about the past. Historians make sure that their accounts are grounded on the evidence of the available historical record. Therefore, their explanation and interpretation requires that a historian should reach the hypothesis about social causes and cultural meaning. The historian's task, it is to conduct historical research for the identification, analysis, and interpretation of past events. They listen with museum and other historical sites and locations to provide advice and other recommendation regarding historical conservation and the significance of artifacts, sites, and monuments. They consult and collaborate with groups, organizations, museums, and foundations to promote historical preservation and activities. They prepare and review publication and exhibits in museum to ensure historical accuracy. And lastly, they collect detailed information from reliable sources on individuals to write biographies. Historians are required to answer the what question when researching in order to provide a conceptualization and fictional description of events and the circumstances of the past. For example, they tend to ask what happened, what was it like, and what were some of the circumstances and happenings that took place during this period in the past. To furthermore, historians often ask the why questions as well in looking at why these events occurred. By looking deeply at the condition and the forces that brought about the event. Okay, this body of a question, it actually invites historians to provide an explanation about the event. For an example, we can take a look at the rise of the Soweto uprising. In this kind of a question of why, historians will be providing an explanation about the background circumstances and the human choices that led to the Soweto uprising. Okay, so historian will then explain the historical outcomes by identifying first the social causes and the actions that brought about the rise of the Soweto uprising. And lastly, historians answer the how questions, okay, in looking at how did these outcomes came to pass, okay. Here, historians will look at the processes through which the outcomes occur in order to answer the how question. For example, we'll look at the Soweto uprising in 1976. Okay, looking at how learners decided that no, we actually want to strike. Okay, this question tend to look at the likelihood of the event on how was the outcome possible. So here, historians will look at how did the Soweto learners manage to pull such an event. By doing so, historians will be required to investigate, of course, okay, on the possibilities that maybe young leaders of Soweto might have been in contact with the ANC political leaders. Okay, and some historians will also suggest that no, I think that the learners were influenced by the growth of trade union during that time. So, in doing this, historians will be trying to answer the how possible of the side of the event that took place. Historians are required to show their historical thinking skills in their investigations as they are supposed to puzzle together the human meanings and interpretation that underline a given complex series of the historical action. And also, historians are supposed to make readers have a sense of historical events and action in terms of thought, motive, and state of mind of the participant. The other intellectual task for historians is that they discover and make sense of archival information that exists about a given event or time in the past. Historians tend to interpret piece of evidence and somehow they need to fit the mass of evidence into a coherent and a trustful story because historical data do not actually speak for themselves. Okay, they need historians. Archives are incomplete, ambiguous, and contradictory and confusing. The challenges that historians face in doing the task are as follows. When looking at the provided picture, it represents a Spanish civil war and it shows the challenges that historians faced. Okay, as through that picture, historians must interpret the provenance and the content of the Spanish War through the picture. Alright. So they tend to answer questions such as okay, who are those soldiers in the pic? Where is the fighting taking place? Was the photo staged or not? Because these days pictures can be staged. What does it tell us about the social conflict and the military circumstance of the Civil War? How can it help the reader of history to come to a better understanding of the experience of the Civil War through that picture? Therefore, historians will be required to analyze the whole picture and make a story out of it, which is their required task. Winston Churchill once said, I quote, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Therefore, in conclusion, I believe that for a historian to fulfill the required task, one should be able to understand historical studies and methodologies along with having excellent research and project development skills. As their task, it is to shed light on the what, why, and how of the past based on the inference from the evidence of the present. Thank you.